All right, here we are. Welcome back to Bookwave, looking at Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. We're on Rule 3 and 4 today, starting with make friends with people who want the best for you. So, I'd like to welcome two of my good friends that want the best for me, Pat and Will. How you doing? How'd you like this chapter of the book?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for welcoming me, and I enjoyed this chapter of the book and the next one.
Same.
Okay, man of many words.
No, I really enjoyed this chapter, and there's a lot to go over.
How about we start with a quote? How about that? How about we start
Okay.
with a quote?
All right.
There was one near the end of the chapter that said, "Not everyone who is falling is a victim, and not everyone at the bottom wishes to rise." How do you think that relates to the making friends with people who want the best for you?
I think that quote shows how there are some people in life that don't want to change, that don't want to improve themselves. And so you want to search for someone as if you are searching. Like there's a lot to improve upon. A lot of people say that they want to make the world a better place, but they don't even, but it's hard to find the right people who want to help the world to be a better place. It's all about it's kind of like starting a business. You have an idea, but how can you reach this idea towards other people who are passionately influenced by this idea that you have? So it's all about, it's essentially like soul searching in a way.
And Jordan Peterson talks a lot about all of his old friends that he used to hang out with in northern Alberta, like his pothead squad.
Yeah, that was something.
Certainly can relate to the sentiments expressed in the early pages of this first chapter. Growing up in small town, cold Ontario, it doesn't get as cold as it does out west, but oh boy, November 1st, and it's chilly and snowy, and the days are short, and the opportunities are few.
I may not be Canadian, but I did grow up in Olympia and Tacoma, Washington, and that place was super cold early to the late quarter of the year.
One of the first things that jumped out at me reading this, because I'm also reading this book that I keep bringing up called Your Erroneous Zones, and it talks about some of the sort of modes of thinking that we can get trapped in that'll enable really toxic behaviors. And one of them that jumped out at me reading this chapter was the notion of the wounded healer, which is this sort of classification of therapist, psychologist, coach, what have you, who gets into the practice and hasn't actually addressed the darkness in themselves and hasn't fixed the broken parts of themselves, who is now in a position where they're supposed to be helping others, but they've yet to help themselves, and they really don't have any fundamental firsthand experience to draw on, to stand grounded on, having resolved those serious issues and being able to support someone. And when I was going through the chapter about making friends with those that want the best for you, and you start to look at all of the codependent toxic relationships that you may or may not have had in your life, where you're in a group of people, and this is something that I talk with a couple of my friends quite a lot, where everyone starts drinking and you get shamed into drinking. If you don't want to be binge drinking or smoking pot the way everyone else in the room is, it becomes very violent, and you realize very quickly that this is not a group of friends, and this is not a group of people trying to have a good time even. This is people that are participating in very toxic behavior, and any sign that what they're doing is wrong is greeted with anger and shunning in its extremities. And it is horrifying, the party dynamics that are occurring, especially in small towns and cold, dark small towns, when people don't have the resources to actually engage in meaningful and enjoyable activities and pastimes. People don't know how to play board games. They don't know how to go tobogganing without a 2-6 of alcohol or a bong toke to get them through the night. And like, one of the biggest things that frustrates me is when you're playing video games with someone and they pause 20 minutes in because they need to go and smoke another bong or they need to go and grab another drink. And it's like, we just got started and you're already shutting this down and suspending reality so that you can hit your dependency and get that bar back up to satisfied with like this egoic pleasure craving seeking fucked up toxic bullshit. There's my rant.
Yeah, I really like the terminology that Jordan Peterson uses to describe that kind of behavior, because he calls it motivated refusal to learn, as opposed to being willfully blind, as the saying goes.
And I would also add to Will's rant is that when you dare to be different from your group of friends who are in this toxic behavior and relationship, and you want to be inspired by something that's outside of this realm that you currently live in, you begin to realize the inadequacy of your group of friends, of your group of toxic friends, and this environment that you've been living in for years, even if not a day. And when you want to reach greater heights, your friends will begin to realize what you're doing. And when you try to tell them, hey, I found something cool over here, I think this will be a great asset for not just me, but possibly for all of us, for all of you. Why don't you come along with me? They'll look at you with strange eyes, or maybe even make a fake promise, be like, okay, sure, yeah, whatever. And then they go back to their default behaviors. And that's how I've come to realize about myself after college. Even after high school, too. I mean, high school was I'm sure we can all agree that high school was the fakest of all years of all us. Yeah. College was partially fake, but you did see a lot of interesting things, learn interesting material. But outside of that, it was kind of hard to comprehend, and actually taking the time to go outside of the system too.
I would describe the college university environment that I was in was like unbridled, authentic, toxic, narcissistic bullshit. And like at the time that I went to university, it was like really weird because like 2012, 2013, we're like 5 years deep into the cell phone and social media golden age, and the self-gratifying behaviors and fear of missing out, all of these crazy things that were all coming together for this perfect storm created including Hollywood and all of the sort of stories of college that you expect. You get there and it's this toxic tornado whirlwind effect of either you know who you are and you're going to keep being who you are, or you have no idea who you are and you're going to fall for anything because you don't stand for anything, right? And it's lonely once you get over that. After you do your time in the purgatory of drugs and alcohol and video games and just completely sabotaging your future self, if you ever get out, that is, if you don't kill yourself first, or if you're lucky you never were there and you wonder what it's like. But once you get out, it's so lonely. Like, all of your friends they're just not, end of sentence. They aren't real. They aren't supportive. They aren't there. They have not got the tools that you're trying to use. And it's like that story of Icarus, if you fly too low, the salt water and the salt from the ocean destroys your wings. And I think it's the saltiness of your friends that really do it for you. They keep you down and under. You know,
Yeah.
the sun and the heat isn't a problem at first. It's those toxic friend groups.
Yeah, that really reminds me of one of the pieces of that Gabor Mate podcast with Tim Ferriss I was talking about before we started recording, because he goes over about how like children can either imprint on their parents or on their friend group. These days, more and more often, we're just associating with our social friend groups who we go to school with, and that's where we learn life from, not anybody with experience like a role model. It's just all the other kids in the same setting that we're all struggling along with, trying to figure it all out. Nobody has any clue what's going on. We just trying to figure it out all on our own without anybody guiding us.
Yeah, and it's like you've got a whole bunch of monkeys that have no idea what a wheel looks like, but they're trying to frickin' figure it out, and they're a
Hmm.
stone's throw away from literally the wheel factory. And it's like just the most backwards thing that, like, from the age of like 7 to 25, you're trying to get along with your peers until you get to a point where you realize maybe your peers aren't the people you should be looking up to. And then all
Hmm.
of a sudden, it's this notion that I talk a lot about with people that are in my life is like age is a thing and maturity is a thing. And for some people, maturity happens really young, and for others, it never happens. But once you hit that point where you get it and you realize, like, oh, I'm a member of the human race and I need to take responsibility for myself, your age stops to matter. And you start to look at people who are resonating on the same level as you, and you start to gravitate towards them, or at least I hope you do. And you start to realize, like, oh, I'm probably undermining my entire future by half the crap that I'm doing, and the other half is just kind of stagnating me. And maybe I should start to look into what it is that's going on here and start to understand how I can improve my life, how I can make associations with people that are going to better my life, how I can get a good job, how I can get a good apartment, how I can feed myself properly, and really start to censor and filter all of the crap that you've been consuming for maybe only 18 years, in some cases 55 years, right? Like, it happens to people at different times, sometimes never.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's different processes for some people too. Like for some, maturity just hits like a just flipping on a switch, and sometimes it's a really slow, gradual process.
And like Jordan Peterson says, other people are at the bottom and they are perfectly comfortable there. They have no interest in improving their lives. And a desire to change is a prerequisite to growth. And no truer statement has ever been made. I'm going to say it again. A desire to change is a prerequisite to growth. And if you are with a group of peers that have no desire to head in the direction that you see yourself going, you need to get out of there. You cannot help someone who doesn't want to help themselves, no matter how hard you try. And if you are trying that hard, maybe check your premises and see what it is in you that is so broken that you're going to try and fix something that has no interest in being fixed. It is chaotic and it is balanced and it is perfectly content staying that way until it dies. I've been to the bottom of human existence and it's not for me. I'd like to say that I'm approaching a place that is nearer the top of human experience, that drugs and alcohol and addictions and dependencies are not for me, and expansion of the mind and growth and understanding and awareness and mindfulness are. But it's a battle every day. And if those people that you surround yourself with aren't willing to fight, then why are you fighting to keep them in your life?
And
Hmm.
it's something that you cannot master overnight. It's something that's going to take you days or months to even look at yourself and figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, and you'll never stop. In 5 years' time, in 2 years' time, in a week's time, you're going to reflect on your actions you made today and you're going to say, I was silly. But it's the insight to realize that you're silly that gives you the opportunity to make changes that are going to be better. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do your best today. Any idiot can find a time span that makes all of your actions meaningless. That's nihilism 101. But that doesn't justify a terrible existence. And it is definitely not positive or suggested that you give up.
Yeah, you have to look for something that's not just beautiful, but meaningful. In fact, change is, this is the harsh reality. Change is scary. It's a scary thing. I've explored it many times, even in my writing. And there are times where I have to just put everything aside for just a minute and just reflect. Okay, this is something brand new. I cannot let the anxiety riddle me for a long time. I can acknowledge that it's there, but I can also acknowledge that if I decide to pursue this thing or pursue this with this person, I can possibly get something out of it.
And that's such a good point, Pat, because that's the thing about change is like at a subconscious level, whatever your chaotic neutral is, like your brain is going to resist changing it. Your comfort zone can be the most uncomfortable thing in the world, but if it's what you do every day, even if what you want to do differently is the greatest thing in the world, your body's going to resist it. You're going to get anxious about it. You're going to have doubts. And that's not to say that what you're doing is wrong. It's to say that what you're doing is change, and change is resisted, positive and negative. And that's not evidence as to give up.
Before we move on to the next rule, I'd like to just run with the metaphor of rock bottom, because this is kind of something I like to just use as a metaphor. That like when I hit rock bottom, there was a mattress down there and I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
So like just think about that. Like sometimes rock bottom is really comfortable. That first climb, that first step is always the hardest part, like we learned in Dante. But like you gotta make it.
Failure's so easy.
You have to trust other people to make that first step because you can't make that for them.
Nothing worth doing is easy. Now we do a mid-roll break.
Do. Welcome back for Rule 4. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today.
Scott, why don't you jump right into that?
This chapter is pretty similar to the last one in the way that it continues with the small town theme. Just how lower populations allow people to take on more responsibility and to find their niche easier. That was the part that really stuck out to me, because it reminded me a lot of Atlas Shrugged when they were trying to found Atlantis, or in the Republic when they were trying to found their own republic. Because it kind of talks about the fabric of society in a way that you can't get too big.
Yep.
And of course, Jordan goes on to explain how life is a series of games, and you can pick one game that best suits you. And you can, in a way, you can find multiple games that match your multiple talents and even make you more productive and evolve greater. There's lots of people who have maybe one or two or three types of careers, and they have their own personal projects at home that they don't reveal to the world, and they can be successful that way. Other times there's just one game where people decide to just do one thing. And this kind of goes back to what we've been discussing on Wavecast too, is just the idea of finding an appropriate way of just improving ourselves, and not to just go after things that look attractive, something that can be sustainable for us. But in the end, we end up getting tired and we don't really pay attention to what our true purpose is. That kind of, that idea alone is something that I've reflected on many times. having to go back to it. In the same way, looking at the stuff that I did yesterday and thinking, can I do better today? Not to worry about what tomorrow is going to bring, but just focusing on today.
Man, and even just taking a look at what you did yesterday. Like, how many people don't even know what they did yesterday to even begin to critique how they could improve themselves today? Journaling is so important. Making a plan for your day is so beneficial. These are systems that have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Do you really think that you're that one unique individual that lists don't work for? Or are you just not putting in the effort to make lists work for you in the context that they would work for you? How can you even begin to judge whether or not you're failing to reach your goals if you've never actually made a plan to achieve your goals, if you don't know what the steps that you need to execute today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, for the 5 years that follow from this date to reach your goal? How do you know you haven't hit your goals? Maybe you've never even made a goal. Maybe you've just been dreaming this whole time, and it's time to wake up, check what you're doing, and add to it the next day.
Yeah, and we could use the same example of, drugs and alcohol, or even cigarettes, or any kind of addiction. Maybe you don't even have a plan, but even if you're trying to cut back or trying to quit something, and you just have a little sticky note, not even a full notebook, just a sticky note, and you put a little tally mark on it every time you go outside for a cigarette, And then you look at that at the end of the day and you realize, oh wow, that's actually what I did all day. And it kind of puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
And Jordan brings up the point about the past, present, and future. And I think a lot of us spend so much time looking at the future, wondering what it would be like. Is the future going to have flying cars? Are we be able to colonize on Mars? Will we be able to see the void of outer space? Can we get this one dream job tomorrow? We spend a lot of time doing that. And we look at the past and say, oh, it's terrible. I think we can do better tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the present, what is it? It's nothing but, I don't know. It's just nothing.
Yeah, and the example Jordan uses, this kind of hits home for me as a musician. He says, oh yeah, you're pretty good at guitar, but you're never going to be Jimmy Page, so what's the point, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, but that is the point, not to compare yourself to anyone. And it's like Pat saying, like, we sacrifice the present moment to tomorrow and yesterday, but we never stop and smell the roses today. And it's not about how great you'll become. It's about doing it because you want to do it and actually being aware of it. And like Scott was saying about smoking, say you want to quit smoking. It's like, okay, well, how many smokes do you have every day? Oh, I don't know. Like, okay, well, then we don't have any data to work with. Data is gold. Why do you think all of these companies are tracking all of this different data and making all of these algorithms? It's because data is huge. And when you look at the data, you can manipulate the behaviors. And when you start to do that to yourself, it gives you this whole different level of control over your own reality. You can start to realize that what you think about things that you see make you have certain emotions. And when you have those emotions, you start to do these patterns of behaviors that get you stuck in loops. And you can hijack yourself with a single thought, but at the same time, you can take control with another thought. A bit of mindfulness here, a bit of productivity tracking there, maybe a journal or a wish list or a dream board or a life map, and you can see yourself improving exponentially. And when you're exponentially improving, who knows how good you'll be? Who knows how great of a guitarist you could be if you stopped worrying about how bad of a guitarist you are right now.
And also, I would also say that we find the future depending on the person, of course, we see the future as either very attractive or bleak. And we always look for satisfaction. We always look for someone to say, good job, or hey, you finally made it, when we go up the hill and everything. But no one ever tells us, hey, I'm glad you're here with me while we go up this hill together. Or hey, look around you.
Well, I'm glad you guys are here climbing up this mountain with me.
Hell
Here,
yeah.
here. And look, guys, like if the concept of making a list and comparing yourself to who you were yesterday is so crippling that you can't get out of your bed because of anxiety and depression, if you're truly stuck ruminating about the past and dreading the future, you need help. And you need to be strong enough to ask for help, whether it's a mother, a brother, a sister, an uncle. You need to start the process of getting help. Find a therapist, see your doctor, go for a walk, whatever it is that you need to do to heal, you need to start healing. But just because you're sick is no excuse to keep being sick.
Yeah, that's really important.
It's hard out there. It's real hard. But that doesn't mean you can't be aware of it and decide to make a change. No one's saying you're going to be happy overnight. Lord knows it didn't work that way for any of us. But it's okay not to feel completely terrible. To just feel completely neutral is a really great place to get to. To not spend your day or even just a couple hours of your day dreading tomorrow or ruminating about yesterday is a huge improvement. Even a minute of it, if that's all you can get, a single second of clarity where the voices stop, you deserve it.
Yeah, and he kind of talks about that in the form of an evil triad of arrogance, deceit, and resentfulness. Those are like the three tendencies that you have to really look out for.
Hell yeah. These two chapters hit pretty hard for me. Like the whole book obviously hits pretty hard, but like there's a wealth of good insight in this two chapter words.
And a lot of the parts in this book I see really relating to other chapters that I know are coming up or have already been passed. Because there's a part in this chapter that says, when you have something to say, silence is a lie. And he has a whole chapter on lying coming up, so.
Yeah, and plus the alternative, when you remain silent, is having someone to do it for you. Or, take your own voice and just implement their own.
And he talks about suffering being desire, and the solution to that is put all your desires on a hierarchy, figure yourself out, and start striving towards those goals. Because you can't manage everything at once.
No, exactly. You need to be nice to yourself. You need to reward yourself, and you need to understand that you're not going to just completely change overnight. You can't go into the gym after 6 months off and do the workout you used to do at the peak of your fitness level. Much like you can't put a million expectations on yourself. Start with one thing, start with a part. And over time, all of these tiny little aspects of yourself that you're saying, hey, can we wake up a bit earlier? And then when we do, we'll reward ourselves instead of being this slave driver with these crazy expectations. You need to promote good, positive change in yourself. And you have to be someone that will want to listen to yourself. It's a balance. Eventually, those parts turn into a greater whole.
Well, so far the book is it's really good so far, and I know he goes into a darker section in Rule 6, I believe that's coming up. But other than that, I'm really glad to be getting back into this book.
Yeah, it's a great read. It's well put together. It's not just 12 random pieces of advice. They all fold into one higher mode of living and can be applied to anybody at any stage in life. I highly recommend it.
Hey, Will, didn't you have any questions about God or religion or something related
Yeah,
to these chapters?
Honestly, I'm surprised just how little I wanted to talk about the Bible for how much it came up in these chapters. I had so many notes. I thought for sure this was going to be the podcast that I proved you weren't an atheist in, and it just never came to that.
I think that might come up later in the book.
It came up a lot, the Bible.
Yeah, he talks about the difference between the New Testament God and the Old Testament God.
And I've got nothing to say about it. For all the notes that I made about the Bible and how you're blind to the fact that you're blind and you don't even know what you believe in. And no, I think I'm about done with my ranting, and I'm probably going to read the Bible at some point because obviously it was brought up a lot in this chapter, and I hate being on the outside of a joke or a reference or an understanding. But yeah, I don't know. Don't kill people.
Yeah, I guess. Till next time, like, comment, subscribe, and may the force be with you.
Or equal to mass times acceleration.
Eat more lobster.